The little boy whispered, "Mama can't walk anymore." The cowboy carried them both into his cabin. Late afternoon, outskirts of a snow-draped frontier town. Winter, 1887. Snow dusted the winding dirt road, where earth met sky in a dull blur of gray and white. The sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across the frozen path that led away from the main stretch of town. Along that road trudged a woman and a boy, heads bowed not just from wind, but from something heavier. Nell Hawthorne, not yet 30, bore the weight of a heavy flour sack across her back. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, damp from breath and snow. Every step was deliberate, careful. Her boots left staggered imprints, one slightly deeper than the other. Beside her walked her son, Caleb. He was 5, maybe a little older, the kind of child who had learned early that silence was safer. His mittens were worn, and his coat too thin. He kept close, glancing up at her every few steps, eyes wide beneath the brim of his knit cap. He reached up once to touch the flour strap slipping from her shoulder. She shook her head gently, as if to say, "Let Mama carry this, I'm fine." But she was not. Nell's left foot had begun to betray her. It slipped slightly each time it hit the snow-packed road. She bit her lip, said nothing. Her breath was shallow and too quick. Her hands gripped the sack tighter, not to lift it better, but to hide the tremble. Caleb watched everything. He said nothing, but his steps edged closer. Then, finally, he stopped. "Mama, does your leg hurt?" Nell forced a smile, faint and brittle. "No, love. Just tired is all." He frowned. Then, without asking, he knelt on the snowy road and began pressing his small hands against her ankle. Clumsy, but careful. "Let me rub it," he whispered, "so it stops hurting." Nell placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression cracking. She closed her eyes. He knew. There was no more hiding it. They continued, slower now. A narrow cabin appeared ahead, framed by a broken fence and bare trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. Only a few more yards. Then her body gave out. She bent to ease the sack to the ground, but her left knee buckled without warning. She dropped silently, no cry, no moan. The flour bag tipped, splitting slightly at the seam. A soft plume of white spilled across the snow, indistinguishable from the ice around it. Nell tried to rise. Her hand slipped, her thigh shook, her ankle was done. She pressed her back to the fence, sliding down into the drift. Her face had lost all color, but it was not from the cold. "Mama?" Caleb's voice was a frightened thread. I just need a minute," she murmured. She didn't meet his eyes. He looked around. His breath formed uneven clouds. Then he saw a man through the window of the cabin, a tall figure bending over a saddle, working quietly. Caleb hesitated, then turned and ran. He tapped on the door with his little fist. Once, twice, 3 times. The door creaked open, revealing the man, rugged, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-30s, with wind-chapped skin and a dark beard. Caleb swallowed. "Sir, my mama can't walk anymore. Could you carry her inside?" The man did not speak right away. He looked past the boy to the woman curled in the snow. Then he stepped into the cold. Nell lifted her head as he approached. Her voice was barely above the wind. "I didn't faint, and I didn't fall. My leg just doesn't listen to me right now." The man crouched, nodded once, then carefully slipped one arm behind her back, the other beneath her knees. He lifted her as if she weighed no more than that flour sack, now half buried in the snow. With one arm, he held her steady. With the other, he reached out, and Caleb took his hand. He said nothing, and together, the 3 of them crossed the threshold into warmth. Evening settles in. The cabin breathes with firelight. Elias carried Nell through the open door, the wind sighing shut behind him. Inside, the cabin welcomed them with the scent of wood smoke and iron. The warmth hit her like a wave, shocking, tender. He set her down gently on a chair near the hearth, her injured leg cradled with care. The fire crackled louder as Elias added more logs, building it to a full flame. Orange light danced along the floorboards, chasing off the cold. Caleb stood beside his mother, hand gripping her skirt as if afraid she might vanish again. Elias said nothing. He glanced once at the boy, then moved across the room. From a chest, he took out a thick wool blanket, folded it in half, and handed it to Nell without a word. Then, a battered tin mug of warm water, and another for Caleb. Nell's lips parted, perhaps to thank him, but the quiet in the room asked her to hold it. She accepted the blanket, wrapping it over Caleb's shoulders, then herself. The cabin was small and simple, pine walls, low ceiling, rough planked floor, but it was clean. Lined shelves held jars of dried herbs and beans, a rocking chair in the corner, a faded embroidery hoop on the wall, the thread halfway through a forgotten flower, a scarf neatly folded on the edge of the dresser, untouched by dust. It had once belonged to a woman, that was clear. Elias returned with a small basin and a kettle of steaming water. He glanced at Nell's feet. "You can't get the boot off?" he asked, voice like low gravel. She hesitated. "It's swollen." He nodded once. No judgment, no more questions. He knelt before her, resting the basin near her feet. Caleb moved as if to help, but Elias placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You stay warm. I got this." Caleb obeyed, sliding to the sheepskin rug by the fire, tucking the blanket tighter around himself. Elias loosened the laces of her boot, his hands large but gentle. When she flinched, he slowed. His touch was deliberate, like someone used to working with things that could break. Nell watched him, watched how he didn't rush, watched how he filled the silence, not with words, but with presence. The boot came off with a soft tug. Her ankle was already swelling, red blooming through the skin. Elias did not comment. He dipped a cloth into the warm water, wrung it out, and placed it lightly against the bruised area. Nell winced. Elias looked up at her, holding her gaze for a long beat. "Just bruised, maybe a sprain," he said quietly. "You'll be all right." "Thank you," she said. He didn't reply. He stood, washed his hands, and turned back toward the fireplace. As he did, he caught sight of Caleb fidgeting with his sleeve, trying to hide a tear in the fabric. Elias reached for a small tin box from a nearby shelf. Inside were a needle, some black thread, and a pair of old buttons. He knelt beside the boy and motioned for his arm. Caleb hesitated, then offered the sleeve. Elias threaded the needle, clumsy at first, but determined. His thick fingers moved awkwardly, but he worked with care, pulling each stitch tight and slow. Caleb watched in silence. Then, softly, the boy whispered, "No one's fixed my clothes since Papa." Elias's hand paused in mid-stitch, his brows pulled together slightly. He did not speak. Instead, he tied off the thread, snipped it short, and laid the boy's arm gently back across his lap. Then, he reached up and ran his hand once, firmly, warmly, across Caleb's head, tousling his hair. A single gesture, nothing more. But Caleb leaned into it. And Nell, watching, said nothing, but her eyes stung for the first time that day. Morning arrived softly, like a secret kept between mountains. Nell woke to the warmth of a still-burning fire and the faint scent of pine smoke curling through the air. Caleb lay curled beside her, his small hand resting against her arm. A second blanket, one they had not brought, was tucked gently over both of them. Someone had thought of them in the night. She blinked against the soft light spilling in through the window. Outside, the snow had settled smooth over the ground, untouched. A silence not empty, but whole. Across the room, Elias sat by the window. He was sharpening a knife, slowly, rhythmically, as the light touched the angles of his face, etched with lines not from age, but from years lived too hard and too honestly. The rasp of steel on stone was the only sound for a long time. Nell's voice broke the stillness, low and clear. "I didn't mean to make it your burden." Elias did not turn from the window. "You didn't." Just that. No bitterness, no charity, as if it were a truth as natural as sunrise. She adjusted the blanket around Caleb and sat up straighter, wincing as her leg protested. "I didn't always make poor choices," she said after a pause. "But poor choices. They have a way of piling up when there's no one left to stop you." Still, Elias said nothing. She began to speak, not in a rush, but in slow, deliberate pieces, like laying down stones after carrying them too long. "My husband died in a mine shaft collapse. Nobody came for him for 2 days. By the time they dug through, he was gone. He wasn't the only one, but he was mine." Elias's hand stilled on the whetstone. "The owner blamed faulty maps. The sheriff blamed God." She took a shaky breath. "They took our house 3 weeks later. Said we were squatting. I showed the deed. They said it was lost in the records." Nell's voice did not rise. It didn't need to. "After that, the people I thought were friends stopped looking me in the eye. Caleb got sick that winter. No doctor would come. I started walking because there was nothing else to do." Elias finally looked over. His eyes met hers, steady. "And now you're here," he said simply. Nell nodded. "Yes, now I'm here." Silence returned. But it was different now. Not distance, recognition. Her gaze wandered across the room, tracing the lines of the small cabin. It was spare, but not unlived in. And in the far corner, beneath a slanted shelf of books, sat a small wooden box. She tilted her head. There, tucked carefully beside it, was a carved horse no longer than her palm, a cloth rabbit, missing an eye but still upright, and a pair of tiny boots, scuffed but kept clean. "You had children?" she asked quietly. Elias's gaze drifted toward the corner. "One," he said. "A boy." She waited for more. None came. But the way he said it, low and final, told her everything. She didn't ask how or when. Some griefs don't need names to be real. Then, Caleb's small footsteps broke the silence. He shuffled into the room, rubbing his eyes with one hand.